Yeah, I definitely, when I was a kid and now still, but I definitely liked hands-on activities. For some reason, I still don't know what it was about me and reading, but I just never would sit down and read a book. It drove my
Oh,
dad nuts. And, as I go through high school and stuff, found out I'm slow at reading or what, I don't know, whatever. I did tests and it's like, oh, well, I can't comprehend anything when I read. So reading growing up for me was like not an activity I did much. So my mom and dad would have to find other activities, which usually for me was sports and things to, release some of my competitive energy.
mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
wasn't so built up with energy at home. So,
So yeah, most of the time when someone says they don't like to read, I usually feel like they haven't found the right book yet. But you know, I have a brother that it's not his favorite thing either. He that's not the way he learns best.
uh-huh.
So I mean, when we're talking about learning, there's so many different ways to do it. That if reading isn't it, there's a lot of other options. But I love books. The
So
non-reading thing is like, oh,
yeah, I get it. Like when I tell people that, they're like, wait, you don't read? Like, I would have thought you loved reading. So
mm-hmm,
introverted and, creative and all that. I actually kind of like to write, which is odd. Like I would get good writing grades in school and did really well in all of the writing tests. But reading is like, I'll read a page, particularly when I'm reading when I'm reading fiction. I'll read a page and immediately, or even read a paragraph and immediately not know what that paragraph was about. So it was very
okay,
frustrating for me to try to read a whole book and the whole time just lost. Like, wait, who's this character? And is a main character? And wait, I would always just get people confused and stuff. However, as I got older, I've read maybe, I'm 31 now. So since I graduated college and 9 years ago or whenever it was, I've probably read 6 to 8 books. That's it. That's averaging a book a year for those listening, if that. And all of those books I've noticed were nonfiction. It was stuff that
right,
helped me in my life. So as I've noticed that, maybe I do like reading nonfiction, but fiction is just too confusing. So maybe growing up, it was all fiction because, most kids' books are fiction. And that was frustrating me. I don't know, but I still don't choose to read as a leisure activity, but sometimes I'll get interested in a book like you said, and I'll find a right book and I'll read it all the way through and I'll be like, oh, okay, I'm going to apply this to my life. So
right,
I could get behind that you haven't found the right book. But also,
yeah,
as someone that's slow at reading, me, and confused when I'm reading fiction, I know how frustrating it can be for those that aren't good at reading.
yeah. So a lot of the lists that I do are actually nonfiction because
Ooh.
boys love nonfiction. I think most boys like nonfiction better than fiction. They like to know how things work. They like to find out about things. And I'm not saying girls don't like that too,
Right.
but boys are drawn to those nonfiction books. And
Huh.
there are a lot more, I think there's a lot more available now than, there was years ago. And in school, a lot of times that isn't an option. You have to read specific things, and often it is fiction. And
Right.
I think that's, in my opinion, a mistake that people make when they're trying to work with boys because they would do better either one, choosing their own book, that's always going to be best, or two, being allowed to read different types of materials, magazines, comics, and a lot of nonfiction. So,
Yeah, that's a great idea. So when I was in high school and middle school, and I think even elementary, we had this program called Accelerated Reader, called
oh, yeah.
Yeah. And basically you read a book, and then you take a test and you get points based on whether you pass the test or not. And that was extremely frustrating for me because I would spend 10 times longer reading a book than the other kids. Uh, but then sometimes I would fail the test, even though like I read the book and it took me forever. And then some kids, read the cliff notes and they pass the test. And that was extremely frustrating for me. So I would just get the bare minimum points that I needed each semester, or 6 weeks or whatever we called it back then. But I think if there was more, like what you said, if I was able to maybe just read a magazine and get points, just working on that skill development of reading magazines, and because I definitely like reading magazines.
So you do like to read.
You caught me. This just in. Calvin actually likes to read.
Yeah, but because it's different formats just work better for different people. And those programs like Accelerated Reader,
they don't encourage that, right?
Yes, they to me, there are times when they don't really foster a love of reading. Maybe people, maybe it was interesting to you for the competitive nature of it. A lot of times people are forced to do that, right? So, and then the guidelines are very stringent. And so I don't know, I don't care for them. If someone wants to do them and they're there, that's fine. But if they're forced into doing it, I don't think that's a good idea. And I think it actually is harmful in that it can make people think they don't like reading, because they're forced to read all these things that don't matter to them, that are confusing to them, that don't work for the way that they either learn or for their entertainment purposes. So